girl sees Millionaire tied up amidst alligators in the river. Then she does this comment, telling me what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10, and let me know which city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better, so please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The sun had not yet risen when Lily Miller dragged her burlap sack through the empty streets of Oak Creek, her small 4-year-old hands already calloused by the reality she had known for as long as she could remember. Her bare feet carefully stepped over the shards of glass scattered on the cracked pavement, a skill she had developed out of necessity while wandering the outskirts of the city in search of cans, cardboard, and any metal she could sell to secure her meal for the day. That Saturday morning, something pulled her towards the Cypress River, perhaps the instinct to find more materials discarded by families who picnicked on its banks during the weekends. The cool breeze coming from the water brought a momentary relief to the suffocating heat that was already beginning to build, even though it was still so early. Lily walked with the silent determination of someone who had learned early on that survival depended on herself, carrying on her thin back the weight of a life that had forced a child to grow up too soon. Her messy brown hair danced in the wind as she approached the riverbank, where she often found plastic bottles and cans left behind by visitors. But what she saw that morning made her small heart race in a way she had never experienced before. There, in the middle of the murky waters, a makeshift raft swayed dangerously, and on it was a well-dressed man desperately holding a baby in his arms. Theodore Mansfield, 52 years old, had woken up in his luxurious bedroom just a few hours earlier, never imagining that his life would completely change before breakfast. The businessman, owner of Mansfield Construction, one of the largest in the Atlanta metropolitan area, was now struggling against the ropes that kept him tied to the precarious wooden structure while he watched in terror the dark shapes circling in the water around him. The alligators had appeared shortly after sunrise, attracted by the movement in the water and the man's desperate cries. Theodore clutched little Gabriel, only 6 months old, to his chest, whose frightened eyes seemed to understand the gravity of the situation even at his tender age. Tears streamed down the businessman's tanned face, mixing with the river water that constantly splashed onto the unstable raft. He shouted for help, for someone to please help them, his voice echoing through the silent morning without a response. He had lost track of how long he had been there, but he knew his strength was quickly fading. The ropes cut into his wrists every time he tried to move, and the weight of the baby in his arms made any movement even more difficult. Lily stopped at the bank, her large eyes processing the scene before her. During the 3 months she had lived alone since her grandmother Eleanor had passed away, the girl had developed a keen sense of dangerous situations, but also a heart that could not ignore the suffering of others. At that moment, seeing the desperation on the man's face and hearing the baby's weak cry, something inside her moved with a force she couldn't explain. Without a second thought, Lily dropped her sack of recyclables on the bank and dived into the dark waters of the Cypress River. Her swimming ability, developed during years of bathing in the river when her grandmother was still alive, surprised even her in that moment of urgency. Her movements were precise and silent, cutting through the water with an agility that seemed impossible for someone so small. The alligators, initially focused on the raft, turned their attention to the new presence in the water. Lily swam in circles around them, creating enough waves and noise to confuse the reptiles and temporarily drive them away from the precarious vessel. Her heart pounded, but her mind remained focused on one thing: saving that man and the baby he was protecting. She yelled for him to hold on tight, her childish voice sounding strangely mature in that moment of crisis, and told him she would pull him to the shore. Theodore looked in disbelief at the child who had appeared like an angel amidst his despair. He couldn't understand how such a small girl could be there, swimming so skillfully in alligator-infested waters, but the gratitude he felt at that moment was stronger than any question. With coordinated movements that demonstrated a practical intelligence far beyond her 4 years, Lily managed to push the raft towards the shallower part of the river. The alligators, confused by the commotion in the water and the girl's unexpected presence, temporarily retreated, allowing her to guide Theodore and Gabriel to safety. When they finally reached the shore, Theodore staggered onto solid ground, still holding the baby, who had stopped crying and was now looking at Lily with curiosity. The businessman knelt in the mud, trying to process what had just happened. A 4-year-old child had risked her own life to save him, diving into dangerous waters without hesitation. He told her, his voice choked with emotion, that she had saved their lives and asked how he could ever thank her. Lily was soaked and trembling, more from shock than cold, but her eyes shone with a satisfaction she rarely experienced. She replied that she just wanted to help, that the baby was crying a lot. Theodore watched the girl before him closely. Her clothes were old and patched, her hair needed care, and there was a thinness in her face that spoke of deprivations no child should know. But there was also a dignity in her posture, an inner strength that impressed him deeply. He asked for her name, still holding Gabriel, who was now babbling happily in the arms of the man who had learned to protect him during those terrible hours. She replied that her name was Lily Miller. She then asked who he was and why he was in the water with the baby. The girl's question made Theodore realize he still didn't fully understand how he had ended up in that situation. His memories of the previous night were fragmented, but he remembered strange voices, a heated argument at his house, and then waking up already tied to the raft as the sun began to rise. Someone had done this to him, but why? He told her it was a long story, but first he needed to know where she lived, that her parents must be worried. Lily's face closed off slightly, a shadow passing over her large eyes. She said in a low voice that she had no parents and no home either, that her grandma Eleanor had been gone for a few months, and since then she had been taking care of herself. The girl's words hit Theodore like a punch to the gut. This brave child who had saved his life was living alone on the streets, collecting recyclables to survive. The injustice of the situation revolted him in a way he hadn't experienced in years, awakening feelings he had buried under layers of business success and emotional isolation. He told her, with a voice full of determination, that she would not spend another day alone on the street, and that she would come with him to his house, that it was the least he could do after what she did for them. The girl hesitated, her survival instincts warning her of the dangers of trusting strangers. But there was something in the man's voice, something in his eyes, that reassured her, and the baby in his arms smiled at her in a way that warmed her child's heart, which had forgotten what it was like to receive affection. As Theodore led her towards the parking area where his car had remained all night, the keys still in his wet shirt pocket, Lily glanced one last time at the river. On the nearby road, she noticed tire tracks in the dirt and remembered seeing 2 cars parked there during the night when she had been collecting materials. She didn't know why, but she stored this information in her sharp mind, a detail that might prove important later. On the way to Theodore's mansion on the outskirts of Oak Creek, the businessman watched the girl in the rearview mirror. She was in the back seat, carefully holding baby Gabriel and softly humming a song he didn't know. There was something deeply touching about the scene, and Theodore realized that his life had completely changed that morning. Not just because he had been saved, but because he had found a responsibility he didn't know he was looking for. The mansion of Theodore Mansfield stood majestically on a hilltop on the outskirts of Oak Creek. surrounded by manicured gardens that contrasted sharply with the reality Lily had known until then. When the electronic gate opened, revealing an avenue of royal palms leading to the main entrance, the girl pressed her face against the car window, her large eyes absorbing every detail of this new and incomprehensible world. Lily whispered that it was very big, holding Gabriel carefully as the baby drooled happily. On her still damp t-shirt from the river, she asked if all those lights stayed on all night. Theodore smiled, realizing it had been a long time since he had seen his property through a child's eyes. He said yes, and that she would have her own light in her room too, a room just for her, as he parked in front of the white marble entrance that had always impressed him when he bought the house 5 years earlier. When they got out of the car, Lily hesitated at the entrance, her bare feet touching the cold, polished marble floor. For the first time, everything there seemed too fragile and expensive for her to touch, a feeling that made her want to shrink and disappear. Theodore noticed her hesitation and knelt to her level, his clothes still wet from the river, reminding him of the extraordinary moment they had shared. He told her, his voice firm but gentle, that this was her home now too, and that she didn't need to be afraid of breaking or dirtying anything, that houses were meant to be lived in, not just admired. Inside the mansion, Marilyn Mansfield descended the mahogany staircase with a perplexed expression on her face. The 43-year-old woman, elegant in her blue silk robe, stopped abruptly upon seeing her soaked husband entering the house, accompanied by a dirty child and a baby she didn't recognize. She asked Theodore what on earth had happened to him and who these children were, her voice carrying an irritation she tried to disguise with concern. Theodore looked at his wife, noticing something strange in her reaction. Marilyn seemed more surprised than relieved to see him safe, and there was a tension in her movements that he couldn't quite decipher. He decided to keep the details of what had happened to himself until he understood the situation better. He cautiously said he had a problem at the river that morning, and that this was Lily who had helped him, and she would be staying with them for a while. Marilyn descended a few more steps, her eyes scanning Lily with an expression the girl couldn't interpret, but which made her feel uncomfortable. She told Theodore they hadn't discussed this, that they couldn't just bring a strange child into their home, trying to keep her tone low. Theodore replied with growing firmness that she had saved his life, and she wasn't a stranger, but a child who needed help. At that moment, heavy footsteps echoed from the side entrance of the house, and Warren Montgomery appeared from the kitchen carrying a cup of coffee. Theodore's business partner, a robust 46-year-old man with graying hair, froze when he saw the group in the living room. His reaction was even more intense than Marilyn's, the cup trembling in his hands before he quickly placed it on a side table. Warren exclaimed his relief that Theodore was all right, but there was something forced in his tone, something that did not go unnoticed by Lily's sharp eyes. He said they were worried when he didn't answer the phone last night. Theodore asked if they knew he had gone out, a suspicion beginning to form in his mind. Marilyn quickly replied that, of course they knew, that he had said he was going to meet some investors to discuss the shopping center project, asking if he remembered. Theodore frowned. He didn't remember saying that, but the last 24 hours were a confused blur in his memory. There were fragments of conversations, voices he couldn't quite identify. And then the terrible awakening. On the raft, something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on what exactly. Lily observed the adults' interaction with the keen perception she had developed living on the streets. There were lies being told, unspoken tensions, and a charged atmosphere that made her want to protect baby Gabriel even more firmly in her arms. The girl had learned to read people out of a need for survival, and everything in that room screamed danger. Theodore broke the momentary tension by saying he would show Lily to her room. He told Warren they could talk about business later, that now he needed to take care of the one who had taken care of him. As they went up the stairs, Lily heard the urgent whispers that began in the room below as soon as they were out of earshot. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clearly one of argument, of something being hastily planned or reorganized. Gabriel babbled happily in her arms, oblivious to the tension around him, and she gently kissed the baby's forehead, silently promising to protect him from any danger. The room Theodore chose for Lily was at the end of a hall near his and his wife's, with a privileged view of the gardens and the pool. It was larger than any place the girl had ever slept, with a single bed covered in a floral duvet, a light wood desk, and empty shelves waiting for books and toys. Lily asked if it was really hers, still hesitant to fully enter the space. Theodore confirmed it was all hers, observing the mix of admiration and disbelief on the child's face. He said that tomorrow they would buy new clothes for her, and toys too, and books, if she liked to read. Lily said her grandma Eleanor had taught her to read a little, placing Gabriel carefully on the bed and watching him delight in the softness of the fabric. She mentioned that her grandma used to say words could take her anywhere she wanted to go. The mention of her grandmother brought a momentary shadow to Lily's face, and Theodore realized there was a deep pain there, a loss the child carried with impressive strength for someone so young. He sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful but comforting distance. He gently asked her to tell him about her grandmother, about Eleanor. Lily sat on the floor, as she was used to doing, and began to tell him about the woman who had been her whole world. Eleanor Miller had worked as a housekeeper her entire life, caring for Lily since she was a baby after her mother left without a trace. She was a strong woman who had taught her granddaughter the value of honest work and dignity even in poverty. Lily murmured that she always said she was special, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the soft carpet. She said that one day she would do important things, but after she was gone, she didn't know what to do anymore. The girl's story touched something deep in Theodore's heart, awakening paternal feelings he had buried after years of trying unsuccessfully to have children with Marilyn. There was something about Lily that went beyond gratitude for his saved life. It was a genuine connection, a recognition of souls that had found each other at the right time. That evening, during dinner in the enormous mahogany and crystal dining room, the tension among the adults was palpable. Marilyn poked at the food on her plate with little appetite, casting nervous glances at Warren, who in turn avoided making prolonged eye contact with Theodore. Lily ate voraciously, savoring every bite as if she feared the food might disappear at any moment. Marilyn finally said that they needed to talk about the arrangements for the girl, about school, documents, legal issues. Theodore replied that they would handle all of that gradually, serving more rice to Lily. He said the important thing now was for her to feel safe and cared for. Marilyn insisted, asking what if her family showed up, what if someone was looking for her, her voice carrying an urgency that did not go unnoticed by Lily. The girl said quietly but firmly that no one was looking for her, that her grandma was the only family she had. Warren cleared his throat uncomfortably. He suggested that maybe they should consider contacting social services, as they had experience with these cases. The suggestion made Lily shrink slightly in her chair, memories of other children she had known on the streets, telling stories about orphanages and foster homes. Theodore noticed her reaction immediately and felt a fierce protectiveness grow in his chest. He said with a firmness that surprised everyone at the table, including himself, that Lily was staying there, that she was their responsibility now. After dinner, as Theodore was helping Lily settle into her new room, the girl gently tugged on his shirt sleeve. She said, her voice low and hesitant, that she remembered seeing 2 cars near the river late last night. Black cars, parked on the road. The information made Theodore's blood run cold. He asked if she was sure. She confirmed she was, that she had been collecting some cans that had fallen from a truck and saw the cars there and thought it was strange because it was so late and no one was fishing or picnicking. Theodore knelt to the girl's height, his large, gentle hands holding her small shoulders. He told her this was very important and asked if she could describe the cars or if she saw anyone getting out of them. She said they were two identical cars, black and large, and she saw some people talking near them, but it was too dark to see their faces. But one of the voices, she thought she had heard it before. Theodore's heart sped up as he asked where she had heard that voice. Lily replied simply that she heard it here, in this house, today when they arrived. The revelation struck Theodore like lightning. If Lily was right, it meant that someone in his own house was involved in what had happened to him at the river. Someone very close had participated in a plan to hurt him, maybe even kill him. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. That night, after Lily fell asleep with Gabriel nestled safely in a makeshift bed beside hers, Theodore lay awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the implications of what the girl had revealed. His life, which had seemed perfectly organized just 2 days before, had turned into a labyrinth of lies and betrayals. From the next room, he could hear Marilyn speaking softly on the phone, her voice carrying an urgency he recognized but had never questioned before. For the first time in years of marriage, Theodore rose silently and approached the door to listen, his heart preparing for a truth he knew would destroy him. The words Theodore heard through the ajar door of the master bedroom cut his heart like sharp blades. Marilyn was whispering urgently on the phone, her voice filled with an anxiety he had never noticed before, talking about deadlines that couldn't be missed and the need to accelerate everything before it was too late. She told Warren that he didn't understand, her voice trembling slightly, that the girl's presence changed everything, that she saw the cars and could identify voices, and they had to act quickly or they would lose their only chance to get out of this situation. Theodore felt his legs tremble. The betrayal was even deeper than he had imagined. Not only was Marilyn involved in some scheme against him, but Warren, his partner and friend of 15 years, was her accomplice, the man who had helped build his company from the ground up, who frequented his house like family, had participated in a plan to destroy him. Marilyn continued, saying the problem was that he now suspected, and that child, there was something about her that was changing him. She told Warren he should see how he looked at her, as if she had awakened something in him that had been dormant. Theodore backed away from the door, his heart pounding so hard he was sure Marilyn could hear it. He returned silently to the hallway and took refuge in his office, where he spent the next few hours trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal he had discovered. His wife and his best friend had conspired against him. But why? And what exactly did they intend to do? The next morning, Theodore woke up early and went to check on Lily, finding the girl already awake, sitting in the window with Gabriel in her lap, watching the gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. There was something profoundly peaceful about the scene, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions consuming him. Lily greeted him with a smile that lit up the whole room. She said Gabriel had woken up hungry, but she didn't know where to find milk for him. The girl's natural concern for the baby touched Theodore's heart. Even at only 4 years old and adjusting to a completely new world, Lily had taken on the responsibility of caring for Gabriel as if he were her younger brother. There was a maturity in her that contrasted with her fragile appearance, an inner strength that constantly impressed him. He said they would go to the kitchen to prepare a bottle for him, extending his hand to help her down from the window, and that afterwards they needed to talk about some important things. In the kitchen, while Theodore prepared the warm milk for Gabriel, Lily explored the cabinets with respectful curiosity, carefully touching the utensils as if they were precious treasures. The girl had spent her entire life seeing this kind of kitchen only through windows or in discarded magazines on the street, and being inside seemed like a dream she feared waking from. Theodore sat at the massive wooden table beside her and said he needed to ask her some questions about last night, about what she heard when they arrived. The girl stopped rocking Gabriel, who was happily drinking from his bottle, and focused all her attention on Theodore. She asked if it was about the voices she recognized. He confirmed it was exactly that, telling her it was very important and could be dangerous for all of them. Lily closed her eyes, concentrating on the memories of that traumatic night when she had witnessed more than a child should see. She began, her voice low but clear, saying she was collecting near the bridge, that it was very late because at night people sometimes throw good things in the trash from restaurants that are closing, and she saw 2 black cars parked on the road leading to the river. Theodore leaned forward, absorbing every word the girl said with total intensity. He urged her to continue, to tell him what else she saw. She said there were 4 people talking near the cars, 2 women and 2 men. One of the women spoke louder than the others, ordering everyone to do something. She talked about ending the problem before he found out everything. Theodore's blood ran cold. He asked if she recognized that woman's voice. Lily looked directly into his eyes and said yes, that it was Mrs. Marilyn, that she was sure, because she has a special way of talking, kind of as if she's always nervous. The confirmation of Theodore's suspicions was like a punch to the gut. Marilyn wasn't just involved, she was the leader of the group. He asked about the men, if she recognized any of them. She said one of them was Mr. Warren, that she remembered his voice because he talked a lot at dinner yesterday. But there was another man she didn't know, and a woman she had never seen before either. Theodore took a deep breath, trying to process this devastating information. His wife had organized a group of people to execute some plan against him, and Warren was an active part of this conspiracy. But who were the other 2, and what was their exact goal? He asked if she heard anything about money or about the company. The girl shook her head thoughtfully. She said she heard Mrs. Marilyn talk about offshore accounts and transferring everything before he discovered the fake documents, and Mr. Warren said something about speeding up the sale of the machinery. Each revelation was a stab to Theodore's heart. Not only did his wife and partner want to physically harm him, they were robbing his company, selling equipment, and transferring money to offshore accounts. It was an elaborate scheme that had likely been planned for months, perhaps years. Lily added hesitantly that there was one more thing that she saw when they put him on the raft, and Mrs. Marilyn told the men he had to disappear completely because he knew too much about the fake contracts. The final revelation struck Theodore like a thunderbolt. Marilyn had ordered his elimination. His own wife had planned his death, and only the courage of a 4-year-old girl had prevented the plan from succeeding. The gratitude he felt for Lily mixed with a cold, calculating anger he hadn't experienced in years. At that moment, footsteps echoed down the stairs, and Marilyn appeared in the kitchen, wearing an elegant navy blue dress and carrying a large handbag. Her expression hardened slightly when she saw Theodore and Lily talking intimately at the table, but she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She greeted him, kissing his forehead quickly, and said she had to leave early today for an important meeting with the accountant about some irregularities they discovered in the company's books. The irony of the lie almost made Theodore laugh bitterly. Marilyn was talking about irregularities she herself had created, likely meeting with her accomplices to accelerate the theft now that they knew he had survived. He asked what kind of irregularities, keeping his voice carefully neutral. She replied that they were boring technical issues, discrepancies in some invoices, problems with suppliers, and that Warren was handling everything, but they needed to resolve it quickly, avoiding prolonged eye contact. Lily observed the interaction with the keen perception she had developed living on the streets. She could feel the tension between the adults, the lies being told, and the poorly disguised fear in Marilyn's eyes. The girl held Gabriel tighter in her arms, a protective instinct awakening in her. Theodore asked when she would be back. Marilyn said she wasn't sure, that it could be late, and they shouldn't wait for her for dinner, already heading for the exit. She added that perhaps it would be better for him not to leave the house today, that with all the confusion from yesterday, it was safer for him to rest. After Marilyn left, Theodore remained silent for several minutes, processing not only what he had discovered, but also planning his next steps. Lily waited patiently, sensing that the man she had saved needed time to think. She finally asked if Mrs. Marilyn was lying. The direct question surprised him. He asked why she thought that. Lily replied that her grandma Eleanor had taught her to notice when people don't tell the truth, that Mrs. Marilyn fidgets with her, hands a lot when she lies, and she can't look him straight in the eye. Lily's precocious wisdom continued to impress Theodore. This child had developed survival skills that included reading people and situations with a precision that adults took years to acquire. He told her she was right, that Marilyn was lying, and that meant they were all in danger. That afternoon, while Lily played in the garden with Gabriel, watching the butterflies dance among the flowers, Theodore made a call that would change everything. He contacted Newton Barnett, a private investigator he had met years before during an investigation into fraud in a municipal project. Theodore told Newton he needed his help urgently, that he had discovered his company was being robbed, and he believed his life was in danger, watching Lily through the window. Newton, surprised to hear from him after so long, told him to explain everything in detail. During the conversation that lasted almost an hour, Theodore recounted everything he had discovered, from the failed kidnapping to Lily's revelations about Marilyn and Warren's involvement. Newton listened in silence, asking pointed questions that demonstrated his experience in similar cases. Newton finally said the situation was serious, that if they had already tried to eliminate him once and failed, they would try again, and he needed 48 hours to gather solid evidence and find out exactly who the other accomplices were. Theodore asked if he thought Lily and Gabriel were safe there. Newton said that for now, yes, they wouldn't try anything in their own house after what happened yesterday, but he warned Theodore not to trust anyone else in his company or social circle, because if his wife and partner were involved, there could be others. That night, as he put Lily to bed and watched her softly hum to Gabriel until he fell asleep, Theodore made a decision that would change not only his life, but the destiny of both children. He would not only fight to reclaim his company and expose the traitors, he would do it all while protecting the brave girl who had saved his life and had become in just 2 days the daughter he never knew he wanted. 48 hours later, Newton Barnett arrived at Theodore's mansion, carrying a folder full of documents and photographs that would reveal the full extent of the betrayal that had almost cost the businessman his life. Lily was playing in the garden with Gabriel when she saw the unfamiliar car approach, and something in her sharp instincts made her grab the baby and run inside to warn Theodore. She told him, breathing quickly from the run, that a man was coming, and he seemed important. Theodore smiled, touched by the girl's protective concern. He told her it was the detective who was going to help them, that he was a friend. When Newton entered the room, his grave face indicated that the discoveries were even worse than Theodore had imagined. The detective greeted Lily with special kindness, immediately recognizing that this extraordinary child had been the key to unraveling the entire criminal scheme. Newton began by saying that what he discovered went beyond Theodore's worst nightmares, opening the folder on the coffee table. He explained that Marilyn and Warren weren't just robbing his company, they were preparing a coup that would involve faking his death and transferring all his assets to offshore accounts. The photographs Newton showed were devastating. Forged documents, falsified signatures, non-existent contracts that had drained hundreds of thousands of dollars from the construction company. There was even a life insurance policy that Marilyn had secretly increased to $2 million just 3 months earlier. Newton continued, explaining that they had been planning this for over a year, that Warren had created a shell company that received payments for work that was never performed, and Marilyn had used fake powers of attorney to access his bank accounts and gradually transfer money. Theodore felt a mixture of anger and sadness consuming his chest. 15 years of friendship with Warren, 8 years of marriage with Marilyn had all been an elaborate lie to steal everything he had built with honest work. But Newton said there was more, his expression becoming even darker. He had discovered who the other two involved were. One was Claude Fisher, an accountant who had been fired from his company 2 years ago for irregularities. He was the one who created all the fake documentation. The other was Andrea Vance, a lawyer they had hired to legalize the asset transfers after his supposed death. Lily listened to everything in silence, holding Gabriel in her lap and processing the information with impressive maturity. Even without fully understanding all the legal details, she understood that the people who had tried to hurt Theodore were very bad and that their plan was very big. Theodore asked what they could do now, looking at the evidence spread across the table. Newton replied that he had already contacted the police and the district attorney's office, that they had enough evidence to arrest everyone involved, but there was something else Theodore needed to know. The detective hesitated, looking at Lily before continuing. The girl realized the conversation was about her and moved closer, curious but worried. Newton said that during the investigation, he researched the backgrounds of everyone involved and discovered something extraordinary about Lily's grandmother, Eleanor Miller. Theodore leaned forward, intrigued. He asked what he had discovered. Newton revealed that Eleanor had worked as a housekeeper for several prominent families in the area for 40 years, and one of those families was the Mansfields, Theodore's parents. She had taken care of him when he was a child, between the ages of 5 and 10. The revelation struck Theodore like a bolt of lightning. Long-forgotten memories began to surface. A kind woman who taught him to swim in the river, who told him stories before bed, who protected him when his parents traveled on business. Eleanor had been practically a second mother to him during the most formative years of his childhood. Theodore started to say that this meant, looking at Lily with an expression of growing disbelief. Newton completed the thought, saying that the girl who saved his life was the granddaughter of the woman who took care of him during his childhood, and that it was an extraordinary coincidence. But there was more. The detective pulled another document from the folder. He explained that Eleanor was abruptly fired by his parents when he was 10 years old, and according to the records he found, she had discovered that his father was embezzling money from public works and threatened to report him. To silence her, his father fired her and spread rumors that prevented her from getting work in other important houses in the city. Theodore vaguely remembered Eleanor's sudden departure, the inconsolable crying he had felt when she simply disappeared from his life. His parents had never properly explained why she had left, only saying that she had found a better job elsewhere. Newton continued, explaining that the injustice committed against Eleanor condemned her to decades of low-paying jobs and financial instability, and when she took custody of Lily after the girl's mother abandoned her, they were left in a situation of extreme social vulnerability. Lily listened to everything with wide eyes, beginning to understand that her grandmother had known Theodore when he was a child. She said softly that her grandma Eleanor used to talk about a boy she took care of, a boy who loved to swim and asked a lot of questions about everything, and that she always said she would find that boy again one day. Tears streamed down Theodore's face as he knelt before Lily, the brave girl who had saved. His life was the granddaughter of the woman who had been his second mother, who had been unjustly punished for trying to do the right thing. It was as if fate had conspired to correct a historical injustice through the heroic actions of a 4-year-old child. Theodore told Lily, his voice choked with emotion, that her grandmother was one of the most important people in his childhood, and now she had saved his life as if she had sent an angel to protect him. At that moment, the sound of approaching cars interrupted the emotionally charged atmosphere. Through the window, they saw police cars parking in front of the mansion, and Newton smiled for the first time since he had arrived. He said it was time for justice, that Marilyn and Warren were being arrested at that very moment at their respective locations, and that Claude and Andrea had also been detained. In the weeks that followed, as the criminal proceedings advanced and Theodore worked to rebuild his company with the help of independent auditors, Lily adapted to her new life with a naturalness that surprised everyone. The girl attended a private school where her exceptional intelligence quickly caught the attention of her teachers, who discovered she had a natural talent for mathematics and an impressive memory. Gabriel grew strong and healthy under the shared care of Theodore and Lily, who had become a devoted older sister. The baby smiled constantly and already showed signs of being a cheerful and curious child, apparently with no scars from the trauma he had experienced when he was younger. 6 months after the rescue in the river, Theodore had not only recovered all the stolen money from his company, but had also implemented social responsibility policies that included creating scholarships for children in vulnerable situations. The first beneficiary was a street girl named Beatrice, 7 years old, who greatly reminded him of Lily in her determination and sharp intelligence. The most emotional moment came when Theodore officially finalized the adoption process for Lily and Gabriel. At the courthouse, holding the girl's small hand while she held the now crawling baby, he understood that he had found not just a family, but a greater purpose for his life. That day, Lily asked him, using the formal address for the last time, if she could call him Dad now. The simple question broke Theodore's heart in a wonderful way. He replied, of course she could, his daughter forever. A year after the incident at the Cyprus River, Theodore had transformed his construction company into a model of corporate social responsibility, creating jobs for dozens of families and funding educational programs throughout the region. Lily, now 5 and swimming competitively in proper pools, had become a confident and generous child who used her own awards from children's competitions to help other kids in need. Gabriel, at 1.5 years old, took his first steps in the garden of the house where the 3 of them lived as a true family. Not a family created by blood ties, but one forged in the murky waters of a river where a brave little girl had decided that no life should be lost as long as she could do something to prevent it. On the wall of Theodore's office, a framed photo showed Eleanor Miller holding a 10-year-old boy by the same river, where decades later, her granddaughter would save that boy's life. Now a man. It was a circle that had closed, a justice that was completed, a love that had transcended generations to create something beautiful and lasting from what was once only pain and unjust separation. Every night before going to sleep, Lily still hummed the song her grandmother had taught her, but now Gabriel babbled along, and Theodore, who had finally learned the full lyrics, sang with them. It was a song about free birds that flew high, and about how even in the darkest moments, there is always someone willing to extend a hand to those in need of help. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.